With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yolana Weeks.
Our top stories. The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force calls for community help in solving Brimstone Hill crash that claimed 5 lives. No customs duty on approved eco-friendly alternatives to plastic for 3 years in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Ministry of Health of St. Kitts and Nevis updates radiology department with brand new 128-slice CT scan machine.
Guyana president lashes out at questions over oil fund spending. The United Nations Forum in Barbados focuses on rights of people of American descent. Internationally, Turkey refutes U.S. claims of ceasefire with Syrian Kurdish fighters. Now, the details. St. Kitts and Nevis continues to grapple with the aftermath of a tragic accident near Brimstone Hill that claimed 5 lives on December 11, 2024. The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force has issued an urgent call for public assistance to gather information about this devastating incident. As the community mourns, the profound impact of such a loss resonates beyond the immediate victims, affecting families, friends, and the broader Federation. During a somber address on December 16, 2024, Commissioner of Police James Sutton emphasized the severity of the situation.
Fellow citizens and residents, I address you today with a heavy heart following the tragic and senseless loss of 7 lives in 2 catastrophic road accidents within just 1 week. On behalf of the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force, I extend my deepest condolences to the grieving families, friends, and loved ones.
He highlighted the need for adherence to speed limits and traffic laws, stressing that these regulations are designed to safeguard lives.
Your compliance is not only a legal obligation, but a moral responsibility. Your actions behind the wheel are the difference between life and death.
Sutton's address reflected not merely the past tragedies, but also a call to action for improved road safety. He noted that the police would enhance road safety operations by increasing patrols, conducting speed checks, and enforcing penalties for traffic violations.
This cannot be allowed to happen again.
He warned, urging the community to take a collective stance against reckless driving. The commissioner also underscored the importance of vigilance in crime prevention, urging citizens to report suspicious activities and ensure the security of their homes and valuables.
Fostering a spirit of cooperation is one of the most crucial aspects of establishing and maintaining safety and security in your residential area.
He added, reinforcing the role of the community in safeguarding public welfare. In light of this catastrophic event, the police have reiterated their commitment to justice and clarity for the families impacted. As the Federation processes this tragedy, the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force appeals to anyone who may have witnessed the accident or possess relevant information to come forward. Individuals with information are encouraged to contact the Sandy Point Police Station at 465-6261 or 664-6245. As the nation prepares to implement a stringent ban on single-use plastics, the focus is increasingly shifting to reusable and biodegradable alternatives. This transition aims to mitigate our heavy reliance on plastic and foster a more eco-friendly culture. However, consumers and businesses have expressed concern about the costs associated with this shift. In response to these concerns, the Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, the Honourable Dr. Joyle Clark, addressed the issue during her intervention in the 2025 budget debates on December 18, 2024. During her presentation, she underscored the importance of informing consumers about the economic implications of this transition. Dr. Clark clarified that the government has inspected potential barriers associated with the switch and is taking proactive measures to alleviate financial burdens.
A key part of our efforts to reduce pollution and protect our ecosystem has been the advancement of the phased implementation of the single-use plastic ban that was announced in March 2024. This move supports global efforts towards aligning our Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework by addressing pollution as a major driver of biodiversity loss.
The minister laid out the timeline for the single-use plastic ban, detailing the phasing of the initiative.
So we announced that phase 1, we have the prohibition of plastic shopping bags and a ban on their distribution. So December 31st, no more importation. March 31, no more distribution. In July 2025, phase 2 will be no more use of styrofoam food containers. And the ban on plastic plates and cups, bowls, and utensils will be effective November 2025.
The ministry has been working collaboratively with various stakeholders across different sectors, recognizing that the transition will impact businesses, especially those operating small scale.
The ministry assembled an interagency ad hoc committee that includes stakeholders from trade, tourism, and other environmental sectors to oversee and guide implementation. We did this collaboratively. And this group developed standards and sourced sustainable alternatives to banned products.
This collaborative effort seems to have succeeded as feedback indicates significant readiness among stakeholders.
The feedback gathered indicates widespread stakeholder readiness, with many businesses depleting their current plastic stocks in preparation for the full implementation of the ban.
The government has pledged to implement tax concessions to promote the adoption of sustainable materials, further supporting consumers and businesses during this transition.
Acknowledging the potential for small businesses and consumers during this transition, we pledge to pair the ban with suitable tax concessions to support the adoption of sustainable alternatives.
A significant measure introduced as part of this initiative is the temporary waiver of the Customs and Excise Tax (CET) on approved eco-friendly substitutes for single-use plastics.
This waiver is effective January 1, 2025 through to December 31, 2027. 2027. So, January 1, 2025 through to December 31, 2027, there will be no customs duty charged on environmentally friendly substitutes for single-use plastics.
Dr. Clark emphasized the importance of consumer awareness in this transition, advising citizens to hold vendors accountable.
To make it very clear, if your chicken and chips go up, you remind the shopkeeper that the price shouldn't change because the new cardboard box that they're serving the food in is duty-free. Okay? Be informed as a consumer and don't let anybody who accepts payment for slander to fool you. Not let nobody fool you. The duty-free means the price of the packaged goods should not change.
With these steps in place, St. Kitts and Nevis is poised to make substantial strides toward a more sustainable future, aligning with global efforts to combat plastic pollution while supporting its local economy.
For the first time in St. Kitts and Nevis's history, a fully government-owned CT scan machine is now a part of the health service. Dr. Jensen Morton, Director of Health Institutions in the Ministry of Health, said the $2 million investment involved the purchase of a 128-slice CT scan machine, other critical components, and infrastructural work at the hospital.
This is part of a greater project, which was a $2 million investment into bringing computerized tomography imaging back into JNF, and for the first time to have it be government controlled. Now, the $2 million is not just for the bed and gurney, which would have been seen delivered on Tuesday, but it also includes the upgraded UPS system as well as battery, a complete upgrade and overhaul of the entire electrical system of the radiology department of JNF to be able to accommodate the demands of this new machine. And it also includes specifically an injector that will assist us in being able to perform cardiology cases for the very first time in St. Kitts and Nevis, which is a service that we intend to bring to the public of St. Kitts and Nevis by 2027. So when I say government-owned CT scan machine, this is the first time that a fully government-owned machine is going to be a part of our health service.
The 128-slice CT scan machine is the first of its kind in the Eastern Caribbean. The investment began in November 2023 with a signing agreement between Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew and International MEDEX. The construction of a brand new state-of-the-art unit began thereafter.
So over the span of the months, it was the preparation of the room, which I would have started describing. It would have been the plans with regards to the logistics. It would have been the actual construction of the machine by the company and shipping of that machine, and a multitude of other things that would have occurred over the past 13 months. The final part of the process will be its final installation, the final programming of the machine, the injector programming, as well as the finalization of the training of the staff with the actual machine that we have on the ground.
Dr. Morton anticipates CT scan services to begin by the end of January 2025. Until then, the staff of the radiology department and the engineering and maintenance units will undergo training to prepare for operations.
We've already begun the training process of the radiography staff, but this would have been facilitated by them traveling to other islands with CT scan machines of the same company type. We still would have to have them do sessions with the actual machine that they'll be using actually in St. Kitts before we launch it to the general public. So everything's going to be done properly. Our engineering and maintenance staff are all in with regards to the installation process, and they're also going to be all in with regards to having the ability to do any repairs that may be necessary on the ground, apart from the major ones, which will be part of our preventative maintenance process with International MEDEX, and that will take place annually. So all of this is part of a greater investment in radiological diagnostic imaging that we have been partaking in the hospital to try to make us as state-of-the-art as possible.
The 128-slice CT scan machine generates images with a high level of detail and speed not seen with traditional CT scans. Dr. Morton explained that a machine of this capability will significantly enhance the diagnostic imaging facilities at the Joseph and France General Hospital. It is also a perfect match for the standard radiographic and ultrasonographic equipment on site and will complement the MRI services that will be put on stream in 2025.
Earlier in the year, we would have seen that our fluoroscopy unit, which is a type of X-ray, it came into being and it was installed by a medical technology company from Trinidad, and that would have been up and running for a few months now. We still have our basic X-rays done by our X-ray machines. We have quite a few portable X-ray machines which have been optimized by that same company. And now we're bringing CT scan services. The MRI unit, which is also part of the radiology umbrella, that unit is being constructed actively at the back of the current JNF hospital, and that is still on target for the building to be complete by the end of the first quarter of 2025. Subsequent to that, we wish to coordinate the delivery of the MRI machine by the April of 2025 into St. Kitts and Nevis, and you'll be able to see that happening at that time.
The 128-slice CT scan machine is expected to enhance the accuracy and speed of diagnoses and also improve patient outcomes. It is part of the government's greater plan to ensure a sustainable health system.
In regional news, Guyana president lashes out at questions over oil fund spending. Guyana News source reports.
In an early morning live broadcast on Facebook from his State House residence, President Irfan Ali fired back at the politicians and other persons who have been raising questions about his government's handling of the Natural Resource Fund and the large spending of the country's oil revenue. In recent weeks, the opposition and other groups have been expressing concerns over the unchecked spending of the country's oil resources and the handling of the Natural Resource Fund. The opposition's nominated member on the investment committee of the Natural Resource Fund, businessman Terence Campbell, has raised questions of his own, pointing out that his queries have been blanked. This morning, the president said the criticism appears to be aimed at discrediting his government.
Egotistical arrogance and willful ignorance must be exposed. I call it a convenience of conscience These guys and these characters demonstrate a convenience of conscience that is mind-boggling. They call themselves the virtuous ones of accountability. They call themselves the upholder of democracy. But the convenience of conscience cannot be ignored. And we must expose these persons. We must expose these characters.
According to the president, his government has brought transparency to the Natural Resource Fund with the passage of the Natural Resource Fund Act. He said the act is progressive and is better than the one that was left behind by the last government.
The new Act of 2021 that we passed simplified a formula, setting a ceiling on transfer from the NRF to where? Not to a hidden account, not to a secret account, but to the consolidated fund. It established a simplified formula, it established a ceiling, and it established that the money must be transferred to the consolidated fund. Further, it goes on to say, instead of the act they illegitimately passed, where none of us would have known what the deposits and the revenue are, the new act that the People's Progressive Party civic government passed ensured that all receipts required to be published in the official gazette. And what?
In explaining how the country's oil monies are being spent, the president said when a transfer is made into the consolidated fund, it is incorporated into the national budget and is spent in the various social sectors. While shying away from offering specifics on the spending, the president said the spending is approved by the National Assembly, where his government enjoys a one-seat majority.
After all of that, after the parliamentary approval by everyone in Parliament, it still must get the scrutiny from the Auditor General, the expenditure, and then of course the examination from the Public Accounts Committee. None of this was existent in the legitimate act.
The president said he sees the comments by persons and organizations about the Natural Resource Fund Act and the spending of the oil funds as a distraction from the progress his government has been making.
The United Nations Forum in Barbados focuses on rights of people of American descent. DBS News St. Lucia has that story.
The lingering effects of slavery and systematic racism remain a concern for ICAR even in the absence of colonial rule. The organization highlights ongoing disparities in the treatment of people of African descent compared to Caucasians, underscoring the enduring impact of racial prejudice.
The conference's main focus was centered around the draft United Nations Declaration on the promotion and full respect of the human rights of people of African descent. Hence, the views of civil society was crucial to further inform the draft declaration. There were over 50 persons representing various CSOs across the Caribbean region. These representatives were divided into groups of between 8 to 10 persons. The day was divided into a morning session and an afternoon session, and recommendations were sought from the groups on various portions of the draft declaration.
Aaron Alexander detailed the key topics discussed at the conference, emphasizing the need for urgent action by the United Nations to enforce the rights of African descendant people. He also called for compensation to address delays in implementing measures to support Pan-African communities.
Addressing systemic and structural racism. 2. Exploring reparatory justice concerning histories and legacies of colonialism, enslavement, apartheid, and genocide. The topics for the afternoon sessions were 1. Collective rights for people of African descent. 2. Sustainable development and new and emerging human rights concerns. The day was punctuated with lots of discussions and presentations were made by the group leaders.
Alexander highlighted challenges faced by black communities, including barriers imposed by the pharmaceutical industry against the use of herbal cannabis and traditional medicines. He urged the global leaders to support and empower African descendant populations.
The need for greater support for people of African descent involved in the fisheries and farming sectors as a means of livelihood and to further the cause of food and water security. 2. The need for greater educational drives and messaging tailored for various audiences, including school children, on topics of reparations and human rights. 3. The need for greater land ownership by persons of African descent as a means of empowerment. 4. The need for persons of African descent to have access to the rights to use their traditional and integrated medicines approach in an era of the WHO and PAHO trying to dictate what medicines must be used with no regard for other approaches.
While acknowledging some progress over the past decade in mobilizing support programs, he stressed the ongoing challenges that prevent full implementation of these initiatives.
Although the permanent forum is in place, it is not a priority for the United Nations. And even in the UN, there seems to be discrimination against the permanent forum, which is headed by a warrior black woman, our very own Dr. June Suma. 7, the need for us as African descendants to work together, rally together, and stop fighting each other, because we end up doing the work for the persons who enslaved us and oppressed us and colonized us. Unity is the accepted goal.
Alexander expressed hope that the United Nations would fully fund the Forum for People of African Descent, demonstrating a genuine commitment to equality and solidarity with the Black empowerment movement. He encouraged members of the African diaspora to familiarize themselves with their rights and continue advocating for freedom and justice in this post-colonial era. The United Nations Permanent Forum was held on December 12 in Barbados, marking an important step toward addressing systematic inequities and advancing the global cause of African descendant communities. For the DBS News World, Manasseh Stanislas reporting.
We now bring you these international reports.
Turkey has denied U.S. claims it has agreed a ceasefire with the Syrian Democratic Forces in northern Syria. Officials say the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army will continue operations to clear areas held by the Kurdish-led fighters who are supported by the U.S. The force is headed by the YPG that Turkey says is linked to the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Sinem Kosovoglu joining us from Istanbul. How are we to understand the Turkish comment saying that there's no ceasefire deal between Turkey and the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces in northern Syria, which goes against a U.S. announcement on the same issue earlier on?
Well, Turkey has always been against the U.S. support for the Syrian Kurdish fighter group YPG, especially considering that the West sees the YPG as a major element, as a major partner in the fight against ISIL, and after ISIL has been defeated in guarding the ISIL prisoners. Turkey has always been against this, and the motto of the Turkish government has always been, you cannot control a terrorist group with another terrorist group. Turkey argues that the YPG is the Syria extension of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party PKK, and as a proof, Turkey has always said that the very ranks of the YPG are all former PKK commanders, PKK officers who have whom the Turkish government have fought for more than 4 decades. That's why Turkey says that we don't deal with a terrorist organization. That's why a ceasefire is not possible, and we are determined that no semi or fully autonomous Kurdish entity led by the YPG, which is the PKK for Turkey, is possible by our border. This is the Turkish stance, both from the foreign ministry side, from the defense ministry and military side. Also, we have heard Turkish foreign minister, while he was speaking to Sami Zeydan on Talk to Al Jazeera, saying that Turkey, right now, there is a Syrian new administration in Syria, and this is their issue. They should be dealing with this, and luckily, Turkey will not feel any necessity to militarily intervene in the fight against the YPG, as the Syrian National Army, that we formerly know as the Free Syrian Army, backed by the Turkish military, is already conducting the fight against them.
The suspect accused of shooting dead the healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in New York has dropped his legal challenge against being extradited to the city to face murder charges. Let's speak to our correspondent Neda Tawfik, who's across this one for us. And Neda, tell us more.
Matthew, Luigi Mangione was actually put on a small plane at an airport in Pennsylvania to make his way here to New York. It comes after he was in that Pennsylvania court for a hearing. Of course, that's where he was spotted and ultimately arrested after a 5-day manhunt. And in that hearing, he said that because he had he answered the judge's questions in yes-no fashion, but his lawyer indicated that now that he has retained a lawyer here in New York, he didn't feel the need to continue fighting his extradition here. He was then placed into the custody of NYPD officials. He was put into a black SUV and driven to the airport in Pennsylvania. So as I say, a few moments ago, he was placed in a small plane. So he will be in New York shortly, Matthew. He will return to the city where he is accused of killing Brian Thompson using a 3D gun, a silencer, carrying it out in one of the busiest parts of Manhattan in daylight. So he will be making his way here soon. What is unclear is if he will be in court today to be officially arraigned on the 11 counts he's facing, which include first-degree murder and second-degree murder as an act of terrorism.
A twin thought then. Tell me more about his demeanour in court and tell me a little more about what we think is likely to happen next over the coming weeks and months.
Well, Matthew, he was actually calm today in court. Many might remember his last court appearance. He actually had an outburst as he was being taken in, uttering words such as, it was unjust. It was essentially, against the intelligence of the American people. It wasn't clear what he was trying to say, but he kind of shouted and was agitated as he was brought into the court last time. This time, he was quite calm. He was even smiling and talking with his lawyer in the courtroom, taking notes, writing during the hearing. And then afterward, he was taken without any fight by NYPD officials into the SUV. So it will be interesting to see how all of this, of course, plays out because he is facing incredibly serious charges in New York. But we are also hearing that he could be charged in a federal court as well. Now, his lawyer has reacted to that, saying that she felt already the charges in New York, which included terrorism charges, were already an overstep by the Manhattan District Attorney. And she feels if there are federal charges in this case as well, that it would amount to double jeopardy. So she is, of course, defending her client. But she hasn't spoken yet about how he will plead. His previous Pennsylvania lawyer said he would plead not guilty to charges against him. But we are waiting for his New York lawyer to officially speak when he comes here in New York and give us a sense.
They may be tranquil oases of nature and leisure, but below the surface of the UK's waterways lies a murky reality. An outdated sewerage system, larger urban populations, plus agricultural pollution have left rivers in a state of crisis. Much of it blamed on an overspill of sewage, rendering them unsafe to swim in. The problems, say the water companies. The system needs drastic investment, and that will cost money in the form of a 60% hike in bills for the consumer. And what it says is needed is an emergency bailout to stop the companies running out of cash by spring.
Privatised water is a legalised scam.
Protesters angered at the rise of consumer bills say while the water companies have racked up debts to the tune of $88 billion, in that same time, they've also paid out more than $100 billion worth of dividends to their shareholders.
Any bailout deal charged at a whopping 10% interest is about making money for creditors and protecting their interests, often these activists, equity firms from the States, rather than getting that money invested in additional sewage works, extra pipes, or just preventing sewage linking out in the first place. It's basically a rip-off rather than an investment mechanism to protect our rivers and seas.
Since the UK left the European Union, there has been a surge in raw sewage spilled into its waterways. There is a certain amount that is allowed to be released in rivers during exceptional circumstances, such as extreme rainfall. But the private companies providing water to the population have doubled the amount of spills into the waterways, blaming bad weather. Many opposed to the price hikes also point to another issue. Britain's big water firms are drowning in debt. The parent company of one of the largest firms, Thames Water, is on the brink of becoming insolvent, a problem affecting both providers and consumers. The government says that the water companies will be forced to compensate customers for compromised water supplies, but campaigners say this does not go far enough. Especially, they say, if the current system of the regulators protecting both the environment and the shareholders of the water companies continues. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were: the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force calls for community help in solving Brimstone Hill crash that claimed 5 lives. No customs duty on approved eco-friendly alternatives to plastic for 3 years in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Ministry of Health of St. Kitts and Nevis updates radiology department with brand new 128-slice CT scan machine.
Guyana president lashes out at questions over oil fund spending. The United Nations Forum in Barbados focuses on rights of people of American descent. Internationally, Turkey refutes U.S. claims of ceasefire with Syrian Kurdish fighters. Thank you for listening.